So even though my energy may not be as high as I want it to be today, I still want to make sure that you guys get something out of the second part of the class. And I think there's some pretty cool topics. Just to remind you what we've studied so far is we looked at first wave feminism, which was women getting the right to vote, 1860 to 1920. And then we looked at the second wave feminist movement, the women's lib movement, where they marched for rights to equal pay, work, reproduction rights, and everything else. And now we're in this new time that some people have called post-feminism, meaning we don't really have a feminism anymore, we don't need one anymore, it's watered down. And other people have said, yeah, it's still a feminism, it's just changed, it's the third wave, not the second wave. So let's look at what that looks like real quick. Okay, so if you can see this picture, 1915 versus 2015, the ways that women are participating in their right to express and be in the world have definitely changed over 100 years. So I thought it'd be fun to compare these waves to just try to get a sense of what we're looking at. So first I'm going to look at the goal of each of these. And just in brief, we know that the main goal of first and second was political, and third wave is very cultural. Second, we'll look at the rigidity, meaning is there, like, what was the correct feminism versus anybody can be a feminist. And finally, gender expression, because that's been a site of great contention between the waves as well. So looking at number one, the goal, political versus cultural feminism. So political feminism, we remember in the first wave, they wanted the women's basic right to vote. And those who wanted more wanted clean air, clean water, better working conditions. We're really looking at the public sphere, laws. They wanted to count as citizens. The second wave really focused on changing all the laws. So women's rights, equal right to pay, women's right to get a credit card, women's right to not be raped by their husbands. There were some radical feminists looking at culture as a whole, but I would say the movement itself is highly sort of remembered or memorialized through their political activities. Roe v. Wade, Title IX, Fair Credit Act. And like I said, there's some shift to culture, but even then there's the political focus. Now, the very main difference between these two waves and what we're seeing today, I'm going to call it third wave, even though that started in 1990, which was 30 years ago. So arguably, we're not in that wave anymore. We're in wave Z, and that can be part of your final project, determining, do we need a new name for where we are now? But now there's a focus on the cultural. So what's been touted as the third wave, 1990s to present, I don't know. We can maybe change that. Laws are still passed, but laws have been passed, but women still struggle for equality. So their argument is, look, women can run for president, but we won't elect one. We can have a woman like Elizabeth Warren, who's probably one of the most qualified humans to be president ever, and she can't even win the nomination of her party as a woman. So the argument of this kind of feminism is that we need a cultural transformation, not just cultural of men, but within women as well. We need to change what we imagine ourselves can be able to do and how we go about it. So this one is looked at focusing on challenging and expanding what it means to be a woman. Do you have to be born with a vagina, right? We have a whole new trans movement happening. And the number one place, and I'm not saying there's not still political feminism going on, but the number one place now that most feminist arguments are taking place are in terms of representation. So media, pop culture, fashion, etc. So yeah. So for example, second wavers think that third wave is superficial or post-feminist, right? They think it's all about merely fashion or merely pop culture. Like if there's a big argument between Lady Gaga and Susan Brown Miller, who wrote she wrote a book about rape in second wave, and she's like, if Lady Gaga is feminism, then we failed and stuff like that, right? Another one said, look, if equating lipstick with empowerment, however playful or ironic, and reclaiming words such as bitch and slut, it makes a mockery of feminism's lifetime of still unachieved goals of social and economic equality. So that's kind of where the second wavers feel about the third wave. Third wavers say, again, like I said, what good is a woman's legal right to have power if culture won't let her? If she's internalized her limits, if others have limited, if a woman in power will always be a bitch, if a woman always has to choose between a job and a career, what does the legal power even mean? So the argument isn't that all pop culture is good. By the time you're watching this, you probably already see misrepresentation, and we understand pop culture can be quite a site of oppression, but can also be a site of imagination. If we can start to imagine new ways of being, then we can change the basic ideas of gender. Right? So the horrible shit that happened around Hillary Clinton, she wants to keep track of your guns, but she can't keep track of her husband's dick, right? Like these kinds of memes, these kinds of ways of thinking about women are not going to change with laws. This is a cultural transformation that has to change. And because of that, we see really different ways in the ways that people organize. So in the first and second wave, they're very collective, right? The first wave we saw in the movie, they had NASA and their organizations, and they had conferences, and you get kicked out of the feminist organization. And we saw Alice Paul and Lucy Burns start the National Women's Party instead of being part of NASA. So you had these organizations that people join. And the second wave was also collective. People tend to join organizations such as NOW, which is the National Organization of Women, the Combahee River Collective. Used to even get like membership cards, right? So whenever you hear someone say like, I'm a card carrying member of the NRA, and it sounds all redneck, it's because in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, when you join these organizations, you got like a membership card, and you can put that in your wallet, and you're a member of this group. And we know the kinds of things they did were collective, like street protests, ZAPs, consciousness raising groups, etc. The thing that gets the most criticism then of the third wave is that it seems to be more individualistic, or personal. So you're a feminist if you say you're a feminist, right? You don't have to join an organization of feminists. You just are a feminist. So where you see a lot of the activity take place is on the internet. You might do a hashtag campaign. You might take a class like this that makes you a feminist. And there's a notion of empowerment through style and expression, right? Women doing, being more, men doing, being more, expanding the range of what it means to be a man or a woman is considered, what we're doing now. So fighting stereotypes about what women can and cannot do, this notion of girls kicking ass, individual choices. And that's kind of what gets made fun of, though, is that, oh, now it's just consumption. You buy a t-shirt that says you're a feminist, and that makes you a feminist. But just to sum it up, around the argument around culture, so pop culture and cultural interventions, according to the third wave, is what allows for imagination, changing basic ideas of gender, the notion that we need to decolonize our minds before we can make society equal, right? We needed to see gays and lesbians as normal people before laws around gays and lesbians tended to change, right? We need to see trans in our world and recognize that they're all around us before these things start to change. So the same with gender representations, right? We need women of color, and then it becomes normalized. So the idea is the more representation we get, the more we can sort of shift the bigger culture. Is it legal for women of color to work in comedy? Yes. Is it hard for women of color to make it in comedy? Yes. So that's sort of the place that the third wave is at. Oh, and here are some pictures. So of the collective. So here you have, I'm pretty sure that's even Alice Paul, and they're like sewing the feminist flag, the women's suffrage flag together. Here's one of the consciousness raising groups. Thank God they don't have the mirrors. If you remember the feminist women's health movement where they look at their vaginas. And now it's more about, yeah, so when Caitlyn Jenner came out on Vanity Fair, a lot of other non-binary people who weren't white and rich decided that they would also present themselves. And because of the way technology works, we can make our own and send that around Instagram and various places in the internet. You have a lot more. So back then, so in the second wave where it was like women getting away from men, now there's a whole bunch more ways that men participate in this. When I was at the Women's March a couple years ago, there were some women marching saying, "My body, my choice," and then their boyfriends or friends or brothers were with them chanting, her body, her choice. So it's an interesting, it's a different kind of inclusion in the third wave. And of course, the Slut Walk was a march, but there's no organization called the Slut Organization. It was just a call for everybody show up on this day, dress this way, and do your thing. So we can talk more about that when we get to Super Chic.